Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you like this podcast, you will love my new anthology called Moms Don't Have Time to Have Kids. Check it out, and you'll hear from 49 authors about all sorts of things moms don't have time to do. All the authors have been on this podcast. Also, check out my TikTok @with Zibby and Tracy, my other podcast, Sex Talk with Zibby and Tracy. Check out Moms Don't Have Time to Write on Medium. And of course, my new publishing company called Zibby Books. And now back to our daily author interview site and a quick hello from some of my kids. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Enjoy the show. Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you all had a great break. I wanted to let you know about something that I've been talking a lot about on social media @Zibby Owens, which is the hashtag 22 in 22 challenge. We are at Zibby Books. We are encouraging everybody, like all of you, to visit 22 bookstores in 2022. And we're going to provide a whole series of incentives for every 5 visits, and you'll be entered to win a $500 shopping spree, and you'll get fun things like bookmarks and all the rest. Plus, you'll be part of a great community of people all helping support bookstores, authors, and more. We're really, really excited about it. If you want to join, sign up. You just go to 22in22.net. That's 22in22.net and click I'm in and put your information. And then every time you go to a bookstore, you just quickly go back on the site and click log a bookstore visit. And then we'll be keeping track and we'll be following up with all of your different achievements and awards and everything. So please sign up, spread the word. 22 in 22, get your friends to join and start visiting bookstores, and it'll be really fun and exciting. So here's to a wonderful 2022. I'm so excited that you're listening to my podcast and doing all the fun things that I have been trying to bring into the world. So here we go, 2022. Hashtag 22 in 22. Quiara Alegría Hudes, I hope I pronounced that right, is the author of My Broken Language, a memoir. She is also the Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright of Water by the Spoonful. And with collaborator Lin-Manuel Miranda, I don't know if you've heard of him, she wrote the Tony Award-winning Broadway musical In the Heights, and also the film adaptation, and the book, In the Heights, Finding Home, which she co-authored with Lin-Manuel Miranda and Jeremy McCarter. Her notable essays include High Tide of Heartbreak in American Theater Magazine and Corey Couldn't Take It Anymore in The Cut. In opposition to the carceral state, Hudes and her cousin founded Emancipated Stories, a platform where people behind bars can share one page of their life story with the world. As a barrio feminist and joyous mischief maker, Quiara Su Hermana created the Latinx Casting Manifesto. She also wrote Vivo, the movie, which my kids are obsessed with and which I love, and we have been playing the soundtrack nonstop, and she wrote the book for that, so you should definitely watch that movie with your kids if you want, or even by yourself. Hudes is a native of West Philly, USA, and now lives with her family in New York. Welcome, Quiara. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss My Broken Language, a memoir.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here chatting about the book.
This book, I know I was just saying this, but it's so good. I mean, it's so beautiful. You're such a great writer. Obviously, you won like the Pulitzer Prize for your play and all that. I mean, you're just obviously a rock star, but the memoir, I'm like a memoir fiend. I love memoirs. It's my favorite genre. I read a million of them, and it was so good. So anyway, just had to say that up front.
My inner child is smiling because when I was a little kid and people asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said I wanted to be a rock star. So now I feel that it has come true.
There you go. Oh, that's awesome. But now I feel like I have a peek inside of you as a young girl in your whole life. So that means like even more. Would you mind just telling listeners what inspired you to write this memoir and why now?
You know, it's kind of the two sides of one coin of my family experiences as I became an artist. You know, in some ways the book is me becoming an artist. In other ways, it's me coming into my own as a woman in my family. And the thing about being a woman in my family, it was bearing witness and having proximity to so much struggle and hardship. It was very hard times. And the Puerto Rican community in Philly, you know, took a lot of hits in the 80s and 90s for sure. But the flip side of that coin, you know, I wanted to bear witness to that. And I wanted, honestly, to, even before bearing witness, just to make sense of that. What did all of that mean for me as a kid? But the flip side to that coin is it was also, the family setting was also a site of tremendous exuberance, joy, tenderness, healing, humor. And I think that vivaciousness, that life force, that juice, really informed the pain and vice versa. And I'm still so compelled by the kind of coexistence of both of those things in my family growing up.
You described it so beautifully too, when you were talking about how in your family it wasn't always words, right? It was actions, like the banging of the pots. And wait, I have to find, I think I dog-eared this page, but oh yeah, here it is. Language was not what connected us as a family. A dinner table ritual where people gather to discuss news of the day was not at the heart of how we communicated. Bodies were the mother tongue at abuelas, with Spanish second and English third. Dancing and ass slapping, palmfuls of rice, ponytail pulling and wound dressing, banging a pot to the clave beat. Hands didn't get lost in translation. Hips bridged gaps where words failed. I loved that.
Yeah. It's like the harder it got, the harder we partied, the harder we celebrated, and we did that with our bodies. Actually, I was quite shocked. I got to get, later in the book, you meet a character called the Boy. And spoiler alert, we stayed together. He's now my husband and the father of my children. But I was 17 when I met him, and this isn't in the book, but I would go to his house and his family would sit down and have dinner at the same time and have conversation. This was a totally new experience. I was like, what is happening? It was free for all at Abuela's house. And there was always dancing. There was always eating, cooking, usually some sort of healing going on because someone was always sick, babysitting. And, that all happened simultaneously when it naturally occurred.
Wow. And then you contrast that with Yale, which, by the way, we were there at the same time because I graduated in 1998.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. So I was in Davenport, but I lived off campus half the time. But anyway, when you were talking about Ashley's ice cream and, the halls of Sterling, and I was like, oh my gosh, we were, Sprague Hall, all the places. It was crazy, like a little flashback. But anyway, how you contrasted what that sort of, traditional, old school, beauty, intimidating atmosphere was like for you coming, and then even saying about Gabby, like, why did you get that? And she does not get that necessarily, right? Like that. Why did you get that in your family? And I don't know, talk to me a little bit about that, because Yale feels like a very central, or maybe it was my own bias, but a central piece of your coming of age, so to speak.
Well, at Yale, I read for the first time a very important play for me in my life and in my heart, which was For Colored Girls by Ntozake Shange. And in the final pages of that play, she talks about a laying on of hands as this cathartic healing act. And of course, I was familiar with that phrase because it's kind of like a well-known biblical phrase. But to hear it spoken about within a woman's space, it gave me language to something I had known all my life, which was we were very physical with each other. Our bodies and our family, which is, in my experience, quite typical in Puerto Rican families, ran the gamut from very light skin like mine to darkest skin, like cousins of mine or my aunts, from some of us has straight silky hair, like some of my younger cousins, but my tias had afros. My mom had an afro. Body shape. So we had very skinny, and we had very, very, what would be called obese or fat. I didn't use the word fat for a long time because it was such a slur. And now it's starting to come back as like, hell no, I'm going to call myself that. I'm going to claim that word and I'm going to make it mine. And all of these women were wildly confident, possibly overconfident. And it was amazing to see because when I was in middle school, that's when, it was like heroin chic. It was the Calvin Klein underwear ads and everyone was stick thin and looked emaciated. And here was this very robust, cellulite ridden, botch tattoo, surgical scar family, just of mostly women being together, sharing space, dancing, healing, laying on of hands. And it's because that was the environment I was used to. I almost didn't notice it. And then going somewhere quite different, like Yale, I just could see with relief and with a little more clarity what I had left behind and how special that was. Things like eating disorders and low self-esteem, low body image were new concepts to me. Our bodies were our chapels. They were our scripture. They were our joke book, they were like our family history. And so in some ways we didn't have the ability to have those same body issues because our bodies were just much more activated and engaged with each other every day. So yeah, those were things I started to notice with a little distance at Yale. And that's just one of the things. The thing that was most front and center for me going to Yale, being first in my family to go to college, was leaving my 4-year-old sister behind. So she was my baby. She was born when I was 13. And she presented really differently. She had much darker skin than me. She was a very chubby kid from the beginning. She kind of spoke with this like North Philly John accent. Like she had this whole North Philly thing going on. And she was so confident about her body. There's a chapter where I talk about like that I'm trying to get her dried off after a bath. And she finds her naked self in the mirror. She's like 4 years old. And she's like, oh my God, my body is round as Mother Earth. My body's round as the moon. And to her, this is like miraculous, and it made me feel very alive. But I also had a little bit of an because I thought like, so when does the world begin to tell her that should be the source of shame, not the source of joy or celebration? So that was, these were the things at the front of my mind, or some of them, when I got to Yale.
What is she doing now? Like, what's the PS?
Right now, she's expecting her first child.
Aww.
So I'm going to be at BC, which I'm very excited about. And she's a theater producer and a cultural producer in Philadelphia. So she started a Latino and a women of color theater company in Philadelphia.
Wow, that's so great.
Power 3 Theater.
Amazing. Well, you could really feel how hard it was for you to leave her and go into this new environment. So I'm well acquainted with that separation anxiety. You had like a preview for the kid phase, but that seemed like a super special relationship. I also really liked your whole conversation on what you believed in and whether or not you believed in God, and that whole conversation of what does it mean to believe, and who here, I'll read like a little passage from it because of course I'm like botching it as I try to talk to you about it. But here, I think it was a little earlier. Oh, also I loved this whole section on the books that you loved. A book is its presence and absence. I keep just like quoting because you're such a great writer, but who would I be without Ralph Ellison, without the battle royale's electric brutality, without 5 words strung together? I am an invisible man. Who would I be without reading Beloved on the L, North Philly zooming below, if I'd never known Seth's back scars? And then at the end, you said, and yet as I read with double vision, thinking of her often, each book had the strange effect of binding me to her. The more I learned of our divergence, the more I paid it attention. I don't know, just so great. Anyway.
It was me writing about my cousin, who was my older cousin and one of my role models growing up. Such a funny woman, really a survivor and a fighter. And that was on me learning that she could not read and had never learned to read despite graduating the Philadelphia public school system, and just realizing some of the gulfs and divides that existed within my family. I had already begun to be a literate teenager. I loved books. I loved writing, and that was a shocking thing for me to learn. So as I went to Yale, I was very mindful of the fact, boy, I wish Nucci, my cousin, I wish she could read this story. I think she would connect to this story. And then even you start to second guess yourself with those sorts of thoughts, because it's like, well, who am I to judge? She's doing just fine. Like look at all she survived. Look at her fighting spirit. And am I implying that there's a deficiency there? And that's the kind of thing that, going to Yale gave me a lot of double vision there.
Wow. I loved how your mom later, when you were sort of struggling to figure out what to do after Yale, and you were doing a lot of musical stuff, and obviously you're a musical genius in addition to everything else, but how she was like, but you always wanted to be a writer. What happened to that? Right. And then now, like to read that story in the memoir, it's like so satisfying because of course here you are writing it, not to mention everything else. So I don't know. That was so neat.
It was. For a brief amount of time, I collaborated with an incredible Mexican-American songwriter named Leela Downs. And one thing she said to me stuck with me all this time, which is moms just know. And that was a moment when it was like, moms just know. She knew who I was with clarity and with much simplicity, and I didn't. And she was like, you're a writer, Quiara. She wasn't telling me what she wanted me to be. She was telling me who she saw I was. And I had never conceived of that. But once she said it, I was like, oh, yeah, I am. And I had been training all my life to be a musician and put in so many studio hours. And I loved music so much. And Chopin and Coltrane and Bach, in some ways, were my saviors. They saved me from my adolescent depression. They gave me beauty at times that felt very desolate in my youth. And I remember in my mind, my heart just saying like, goodbye, Coltrane, goodbye, Bach, goodbye, Chopin. Like, thank you so much for all you've given me. But now I have to go do my thing, which is right.
But don't you feel like there's still that melody? I mean, even the way you write is still, I think music really informs writing a lot. You can hear it in the rhythm of the words. I mean, that sounds so hokey, but it's true. I feel like you can tell when people have like a really musical bent because it becomes more lyrical, almost more, if the scale is poetic to, mainstream, right? It's closer. It's a more poetic, I don't know. I haven't slept. I'm not making any sense, but I know what I mean. So that's good.
Well, it turns out that musical training was extremely appropriate training for a writer too, from just daily habits of self-discipline and being alone, finding creativity in solitude, to also like working with sound and structure. All of those things remain super relevant to my writing every day.
And now what has it been like? I mean, I know you already had won the Pulitzer Prize, but with this whole rise of In the Heights and how that was like the one thing everybody was, watching during, it's in some ways it's terrible to have a memoir come out during a pandemic and, a book and all of the stuff, right? I've seen so many careers sort of like, so much hard work disrupted, but at the same time, we finally have a society where we can all focus on like one show at a time, which we haven't had in a long time. So how has this sort of rise to fame and achievement been for you?
I have felt somewhat disconnected from it. And I've had to like really consciously find ways to acknowledge it and feel that it's real and celebrate it because it is during the pandemic. And, the work takes so much time. The book took me years to write. In the Heights took me decades to write. And Lin-Manuel and I, who we were in the Heights together, we also just released this animated movie called Vivo on Netflix.
My kids saw it and I'm so annoyed. They watched with my ex-husband. So anyway, I'm going to have to make them watch again, which they will not mind at all. But yeah.
It's very sweet. It's romantic, so, and that took me years to write. So, years and actually decades of my work, all of it opened during the pandemic. But it is what it is. I mean, I don't know what to do other than to surrender to that fact and just be grateful for the ability to write. The release into the public is always my least favorite part because I get self-conscious and I get scared of criticism and all that ego stuff. I have to like work hard on all that ego stuff. It's the making of the thing that is really joyous and exciting for me. So, it was many, many good engaged years.
And what are you working on now?
Some new stuff. It's wild. It's like you spend so much of your adult, like my kids were born and became, bigger kids while I was creating this stuff. And now I'm writing new things. So now it feels like a whole new chapter of life. I'm writing an original movie for Warner Brothers. I'm developing a 30-minute sitcom. Yeah, fun stuff. I have a prison writing project I do that is about people that are behind bars sharing some of their life story with the world. So those are some of the things I'm working on.
It's amazing. Yeah, I read about that program. That sounds fantastic and great way to, give back and help and everything. So awesome.
It's called Emancipated Stories for any of your listeners that want to check it out. Emancipated Stories.
Perfect. So what advice would you have for aspiring authors?
I mean, I think it's really important to know why you're in it, like to have that central compass to return to, because no work that you write is ever going to be perfect. It's always going to be flawed. And you have to kind of live with those flaws. Some of your best work might not be seen that way from the public. Some of your like more mediocre stuff might be really embraced by the public. It can be very confusing and disorienting. Plus, like collaborations might fall apart, all that sort of stuff. And so when you have that compass of what am I doing and why does it matter? It really helps maintain some kind of emotional stability during it. I think the biggest advice I have is, when you're starting out, you just got to write a lot and you got to get your stuff out there. But then when you hit a certain point, especially in playwriting, I realize I'm in this conversation with you talking about a book, but in playwriting, there's this thing where it's like you need audience feedback and you need a lot of feedback. And I feel that it's not great because young writers can become addicted to feedback. And it's dangerous. I mean, you want to respond to your audience and hear what they're saying, and if possible, improve your work of art accordingly. But Glennon Doyle has this quote that really makes me think of like feedback and rewriting. Is like, if you're asking someone for feedback, you're asking them for directions to a place they've never been, So I think you have to be careful with, like, you should be giving yourself feedback. You should be doing the hard work of figuring out what are the deficiencies, what are the strengths in this piece, and can I make it better tomorrow?
Wow, that's awesome. Well, I have no sense of direction, so I'm hoping that it doesn't apply to like writing or anything. I feel like I would definitely need the directions, but amazing. Well, thank you so much. This has been so fun. I know we're both very tired, but you couldn't tell for you. So it's so great to connect and just to even think how our lives have intersected and over the years. And I'm just so excited to see what's coming next and follow your career and everything. So it's awesome.
It's truly my pleasure. Thanks for reading the book and taking the time.
No problem. I loved it. Okay. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.